We are officially recording. So warm welcome again. You've arrived at Inner Fitness, and our topic today is stickability. And before we sort of figure out what does that mean and what does it have to do with spirituality, it's very close, isn't it? Spirituality, stickability. We'll start with a reflection. So hopefully you're seated comfortably. You're welcome to experiment with eyes open, but not in an uncomfortable way. So naturally open, perhaps slightly looking down. And feel free to take a moment to help the body really settle into the space. So you might take a breath in. And as the air is released, feeling the body let go a little more, relax a little more. And maybe another breath in. And that slow release of air, creating the feeling of everything slowing down. We have become such action-oriented beings, human doings, really. But even when the body is seated, there might still be the feeling of inner restlessness, inner activity, inner racing. And so it's nice to give the self time to really settle into the space. It's like applying a full stop, a period, to the end of one sentence. So I can use this time to start a different sentence, take my thoughts, my attitude, my feelings in a different direction. And so I keep focusing on the breath of the body, as if watching it from a distance, an observer of the body breathing. And I notice that there is a very uniform rhythm to the breath, almost feeling like waves of the ocean. And I allow my mind to follow that rhythm, as if the mind is being carried by that rhythm, by those waves of the breath. The feeling my mind is like a boat riding the waves of the breath. And those waves are carrying my mind, in which my attention is seated, to an internal destination. Feeling my attention being carried inwards. This feeling of going into my own inner world. It's not something new to do that, but today I'd like to go quite deeply into my inner world, perhaps new territory, very, very deep, so that there's no noise of worldly thoughts. None of the usual thoughts about things I need to do, different roles, responsibilities, that pressure of time. Not even thoughts about relationships. None of those currents pulling on the mind. This deep space I'm moving into feels very sacred because there are no worldly thoughts. But it's not an empty space. There are still thoughts, but more big picture thoughts. Thoughts about quality of life, about the few simple things that really matter, the things I value. In fact, the thoughts in this space are almost completely about invisible stuff, values, virtues, capacities, potential, dreams, hopes, ideals. It's a beautiful space of higher thinking. And in this space, I feel different. This space of extraordinary thoughts pulls me into an extraordinary state of being. Not ordinary, not even physical. In this deep inner space of higher thinking, I seem to become a higher form of self. This is a space where I am completely in a spiritual state. All that is temporary, fading off into the distance, and what is timeless about the self, that begins to come into focus. This is the space where I can really understand who I am, and begin to develop the power to sustain that sense of self. So it sticks. Even when I come out into sound, time, and action again, this higher sense of self remaining intact as I come into action and interaction. Om Shanti. Warm welcome again to all of you. So lovely you've joined. And our topic once more is stickability. So we might as well start by sorting out what that means. As usual, because this is called inner fitness, we try and get a handle on things by exploring the outer fitness form first. So in terms of physical fitness or physical endeavors, what might stickability mean? And if you want to use examples, you can, but what does stickability mean? Do you think? You can unmute or you can use the chat box to share. I'm going to type the word in the chat box because it's not really a word. We kind of made it up, but we've used it in previous conversations. So one suggestion of stickability is glued to the action plan you have developed. Great. So loyal to that action plan. Stickability. Any other thoughts? So perhaps resilience is involved. I believe it is. Absolutely. There's 3 aspects of stickability we're going to look at. Unshakable, solid, stick with that determination, stick with it. Yeah. So we have glued or loyal, resilient, unshakable, solid, determined. Pretty good. I know the first time we used to talk about this a lot in dance class, and I think you've probably seen that image of the gymnast. I think, the vault is the best example, but the gymnast in the vault event, so that's where you have that sort of, I don't know how to describe that horse, that vault thing, that platform, that raised platform. They go sprinting down a runway at full velocity. And usually they dive at it with their hands and then do some complicated flip or turn. And then they have to land, like the velocity they're going at is absolutely remarkable. And they're supposed to land this thing, and they call stick the landing. You've probably heard that term. Are they going to stick the landing? And it's just it's incredible with the velocity. And then on top of that, they've gone into a vault which only increases the velocity. Then they have to land and stick the landing. And if I tried that, well, it would just be one attempt. No friction, so you're not getting stuck on anything was another suggestion, no friction. So this idea of sticking the landing is really where the stickability sort of comes up. And of course in dance class, although never at that real velocity, but we may have to do what's called a pirouette, multiple turns on one foot. And eventually that has to stop and you have to land gracefully or exit gracefully, and being able to stick that final position. So stickability, this is one idea, but the idea of 3 forms of stickability we're going to look at that really are important in physical fitness and also very important in inner fitness. And the first one is the idea of being told or exposed to something. It actually sticks in there. So it actually gets some traction, if you will. So sometimes we say, oh, it went in one ear and out the other. And obviously these are ideas, some things we want to go in one ear and out the other. We don't want it to stick in there. But there are some things that would be very useful to stick in there for them to gain traction. And that's quite important when it comes to fitness. Today, it was funny, Stickability came up today a lot because we were personal training a client, and now, of course, we can only do this outside, and it was a little windy outside. So in terms of things gaining traction or staying in there, what we started to notice was that we were having to repeat the same cues over and over. They just weren't sticking in there, and there's a reason. So every single time they were doing an exercise, we'd have to go through the same basic cues. This was repeating over and over and over, and they could feel it. So they finally got up their little video camera, their little phone, and said, we're going to film, we're going to record this, you saying it, so that I can have it there when I'm training on my own. But the idea of why would we have to repeat the same cues? What is it about getting things to stick in there? And I'll give you a hint. Doesn't seem to take long for the most part. There could be different reasons, but it seems very much easier in children or new learners for things to stick in there versus adults. So what's going on when we're trying to get something beneficial to stick in there? What's going on? What's causing difficulty? Paying attention is huge. Right. And so these are all actually paying attention. They all have the same seed. So paying attention, huge. It's not, I'm just talking to myself because they actually are watching the traffic, or being present, presence. Yes. Absolutely. We're always paying attention to something. The question is it relevant to what's going on? Need to feel newness. So you might just kind of say, oh, it's the same old thing. And again, we're back to not paying attention. Habits set in which are hard to change. Focus on what your goal is. Oh, you're hitting it all. You're hitting it all. Very, very good. Now, of course, at this point, as I'm looking at your comments, we could easily be talking about spirituality. It really doesn't matter whether it's physical. So the consciousness can be more engaged. So need to feel newness, so that the consciousness can be more engaged. So where is the responsibility to feel newness? Who's responsible to make this feel new? Me. You're saying me? Because we get this a lot. You know, they come to the trainer or the business and say, we need some new programming. And this is a real struggle for us when we get that feedback, because we get this a lot in our spiritual practice, actually. And it's not us going and saying we want new, it's actually that you're saying, show me something new. And what they're actually saying, if we do the translation, is just actually do the thing that you've been given properly. So it was really hit on the head, these two, when you listen, habits set in which are hard to change. The old just is creating this Teflon surface inside. Nothing's going to stick. It's just sliding out. It's like Teflon. The old stuff just keeps interfering. So it's, it's going to pull my attention off. When we say we need to pay attention, I am paying attention. I'm just paying attention to the old stuff. So I'm not actually available to take in this new stuff, the new stuff. So the old need to keep scraping the Teflon layers. Right, so that is my responsibility, is to scrape the Teflon layers. Absolutely. So this idea that, okay, for that, how to get that Teflon off so that this beneficial information is actually going to, and it's hard to let go of the old. It's so comfortable. I wish you all had been in my training session today, because you're all saying the things that he kept saying, well, it's just all so familiar, this thing he does, whenever he does a thing, he just goes into the old mechanics, says, yeah, no, and the look on the face, whenever they are starting to scrape the old off and they're really trying to take this, it will be new, because I'm not doing it the old way. I can take an exercise I have been doing for decades, and it will become new when I actually pay attention to what I'm doing. And so the look on the face as he was trying to apply the cues and have them stick. Stick means they convert into behavior. So stick, he looked like a meditator. Even though we have traffic going by and the wind blowing and all sorts of things happening, it's a very colorful neighborhood, so all sorts of things. At one point, I think a dog came running over to us, but the look on the face was completely undistracted. Wanting it to really, really stick inside, really hear and apply, not in one ear and out the other. This is massive when it comes to spirituality. Physical, it's at least it's something I can see or feel kinesthetically, but when we enter the spiritual realm, it all goes into the invisible. It's a bit more subtle. So it requires remarkable attention, discernment, and honesty to be able to look at what I'm doing relative to what I'm being told. Hema, were you going to say something? Or you just wanted to show your face? That's nice. So really, really fascinating topic. This is all under, I kept saying we should have a session on this. This is all under the topic of following directions. Maybe we'll have a session on that this month, but following directions is a massive and fascinating topic. We have so many wonderful stories. I'll just digress just briefly here because it's so much fun. And I include myself in this, that following directions isn't really our strong suit. And it's usually, yes, familiarity, the attachments, the insecurity, the ego, that kind of gets in the way. That's a lot of that rust. But we actually, I will just give a theoretical so that you can appreciate. I've had this scenario, but a soul was sharing a situation. Perhaps you had this. This was in school, and the whole aim of this exercise was around listening, which is a huge part of following directions. So these high school students were given a test paper. And it was a very unique test. And the way it went, the first thing they saw on the test paper was write your name in the upper right-hand corner. The second thing on the paper was read through this entire exam before you begin. The third item, and those that followed, were the exam questions. And they were very interesting exam questions, like, throw your pencil under your chair and pick it up on the other side, or bark like a dog, or draw a circle in the upper left corner. And the very last question on the exam was, after the second point, do not do any of the exam questions. And the second point was to read through all the points before beginning the exam. So if they got to the last one, if they followed the instructions, they would not be barking like a dog. They would not be drawing a circle, because the last item was, do not do any of items 3 to the end. So do not do any of the items after the second point. So, but unfortunately at that point, people had already started barking like a dog, and so it was very embarrassing. But what happens is we get so excited and our ego gets so happy to be doing stuff and racing through this exam. So this is a very, lighthearted, but this happens completely all the time. I've seen it myself. I see it in others. It's wonderful. So the pressure of the old, the rust, which I think Hema used, this sort of Teflon, that's really, the newness is my responsibility. And we keep going to others saying, give me something new. It's like, but you haven't mastered what you've already got. It would be new if you mastered what you had. That would be new. Why would I give you anything new if you haven't mastered what you already have received? So this idea that I've got to break through the old for this new information to stick. And in the history of the Brahma Kumaris, I mean, this doesn't happen anymore. So don't be startled or shocked or stunned. I'm just sharing what happened at the beginning of the organization. It was only relevant at the beginning, because whenever you start something new, when you're pioneering new territory, it's so challenging. And I think that applies more than anything. Nowadays, our boredom level is so low, as in high. We're easily bored, Hema, or is that what you meant?
Yeah, it's very easily
we have high levels of boredom. Sorry, I couldn't. Oh, wait, sorry, Hema. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, that's what I meant, that our boredom level is very low, meaning like at every step we need something new, right? So very easily we get bored that, okay, no, I need something new. Right. So probably it might be other way around. Maybe I should have said, but yeah, that's my concept, right? At every steps and every day, we just need a newness. And then for newness, someone else or such situation is responsible. It's just not my responsibility to create newness. So we are more dependent on outside factors than inside. I'm not ready to change my perception. I really don't want to look the things in a different way. I really don't want to explore. I don't want to put my efforts in. So that's what I mean.
Right. And the beauty of spirituality is it gives us space to look at these kinds of issues honestly, so that we can actually start to get somewhere, to progress, rather than going around in cycles, constantly looking at the outer world for solutions when that may not be where the problem is. So I'll just kind of keep going around in circles if I stick with that paradigm. So spirituality gives me a space to really honestly explore that kind of attitude or outlook. And I know I was going to share something and it's gone now. Sorry. Gone.
It's me.
No, it's not you. It's me. Clearly, I've got no stickability going on. Memory issues is what's going on. Well, if it comes back, we'll share it. So this idea of being, oh yes, it was the beginning of the organization. That's what we were sharing. So whenever you are pioneering new frontiers, there's massive challenge, massive challenge. You know, it takes incredible souls to be pioneers. And the beginning of this organization was certainly no different. Massive challenges that I'm not sure we can even conceive. When it comes to spirituality, this is extremely sensitive territory for people. And so the backlash was massive. But what they did at the beginning, and we don't do this anymore, so please don't go into shock, but for that stickability piece, and to really be kind of liberated from the old, such that these new ideas could go in there and stick, is they had this idea, they called it a bati. I will type it in. It's called furnace is the translation usually, but they would literally have the first students, you know, it's a bit like going off to a residential retreat. Right? Whenever you go off to a residential retreat, we get this a lot. You know, people will come for a weekend retreat to one of our sites, and they love it, because when they're in that space, they are kind of liberated from their usual surroundings, ideas, dynamics, habits. They feel like they're in a clean space, and the stuff can really stick in there. So at the beginning of the organization, the students actually would have to come and stay for 7 days at least, so that the information actually had a chance to go in. And I really love one-on-one training as well, because what was discovered is sometimes when you're with someone else, you're still stuck in that I've got something to show, prove, image space, and you don't get to really be that free, to really be that authentic. So really having to look at what would create a context for me. I don't need to go into the woods or isolate. Well, most of us are in isolation now for large chunks of time, but maybe it's the perfect context. But what could I, you know, even if I'm physically isolated, I still can have a lot of company in my head. What's going to make it possible for there to be that openness, that new ideas can stick in there, that I can hear in a new way, and not sometimes we hear and we just say, oh, it's the same old thing. We'll say the word soul, and people say, oh, no, I've heard that so many times. Oh, it's exactly like this. I'm like, really? Did you hear what I said? I said, yeah, no, you said soul. You said soul. Yeah. Did you hear everything I said? I said that you are a soul. Yeah, no, I have a soul. I got. No, that's actually not what I said. I didn't say you have a soul. I said you are a soul. You're not the body, you are a soul. Yeah, no, I understand. I have a soul. It's wonderful. Anyways, I've got this problem at work. No, really listen to me. And it's just, we can't even grasp. Whereas at the beginning of the organization, they would just really focus and really stretch. You could feel their intellect stretching to grasp, to move around the edges of those old ideas that had really taken up all the space, really trying to squirm out from under that and really hear and experience. Okay, you're saying, I am not this body. I am a soul, I'm a being. That's radical, that changes everything. That's a game changer. That means that things I thought were mine, they're not. Like, I mean, the significance of it, the signs that they were actually taking in the newness and not just kind of mixing it in with the old stuff and saying, yeah, I got it. It sounds exactly like everything else I've heard. Because it's not like everything else. So that is a fascinating topic, and we've almost used up all of our time just talking about the first guy. So this idea of it sticking in there, being able to hear. The second one is being able to stick with something. And I know we heard resilience and sustainability in your sharing, being able to stick with something. How many have unfinished projects. They're surrounded by unfinished projects. Anyone have that kind of issue? Probably not, because you all are very regular in your attendance. I say no. When I was younger, I loved doing paint by number sets. Do you know what a paint by number set is? They're so much fun. They make you feel like a master painter. So anyways, there are these, obviously these images that have different shapes with numbers, and you have little paint pots that are numbered, and you put the numbered paint in the numbered spot, and by the end you've got this masterpiece. It's wonderful for children. So I used to love paint by number, and I just had this thing inside, because, you know, when you start, it's so novel, it's so wonderful, and we love that newness. But then the resistance sets in. And I remember as a child, I said, no, I am going to finish this. I am going to finish it. So this comes back to a point, I think, that Pauline had brought up. Focus on what your goal is. This is what will sustain you through those tough patches that will come up, the resistance that inevitably will come up. Resistance means the pull of the status quo. This is resistance to change that we're talking about, the old habits. Once they realize, oh my goodness, they're serious about this. Once the old habits realize, whoa, they're really going for this. We've got to rally, form an army, and battle to stay alive, because those old habits don't want to die. So they're going to battle to stay alive. And so how am I going to override that resistance? I need to be so in love with the goal, which hopefully is one of self-benefit, so in love with it, and so in love with the path, the method that reaches the goal. So both the destination and the journey, I need to be so in love, because sometimes we get very enamored by the goal. Then we say, I don't like discipline, which is a bit of a way of saying, I don't really like the journey. You know, so I have to really love the path and the destination. This is the ideal. You know, we often joke, people don't want to learn meditation at all. They just want the benefits of meditation. You know, so they say, oh, I'm not sure about meditation. But the lucky ones are, they love that feeling of solitude, of time with the self, of reflection, of introversion, of that churning, that realization, that insight. They love all of those aspects that are part of the journey towards the destination. That's really important, that I have to love the directions as well. What if the goal is so enchanting that the tough path you justify, sorry, Lydia, what if the goal is so enchanting that the tough path you justify is that, so are you saying the path might be damaging? Is that what you meant, Leah? So you're concerned that the path might be damaging. It's a gruesome path. Yeah, you know, I'm so glad you brought this up, and we're so going to run out of time, but that's okay. Because this is a really good point and worth sort of taking a moment for. This has painful for you. Yeah, this has been the history of spirituality. And one thing I loved when I came to the Brahma Kumaris is they did some myth busting. So just to start with a story, when I was in Montreal, beautiful city, but there is a rather well-known cathedral on Mount Royal. And it has, every time I drive by it, I kind of have a little shiver, because it has a lot of steps, lots and lots of steps, so many steps that lead up to the cathedral. And this is very common in India. We know about Gaumukh, etc. So many steps. And knowing that people have crawled up those steps on their knees out of devotion. So their knees are bloody out of devotion, just to be what they perceived as pure enough to have an experience in that cathedral. This is the history of spirituality. And really, it's way off base. And it's continued for so long to the point where we actually say war leads to peace. Now, a child can tell you war will not lead to peace. Peace will lead to peace. So this, I always say, is a metric, is a measure to use if you're trying to assess the benefit of a spiritual path or any path, physical, nutritional, mental, any path, is to kind of use this litmus paper. If the goal, for example, in Raj Yoga, the goal is self-respect, deep inner peace, to restore peace in your inner kingdom, that is the goal of Raj Yoga. So the path towards that goal should also be a path of self-respect, of non-violence, of peace. The path should match the goal, is what I'm saying. That if the goal is gruesome and painful, if the path is gruesome and painful, I don't see how it gets to the goal. If the goal is peace and dignity, then the path should also be peace and dignity. And if they say it is a peaceful dignity, then either they're lying or I'm not following the directions properly. I know that my sister, who's a Pilates instructor in Montreal, she goes into this a lot. She feels very strongly about this, that, Pilates is a mind-body discipline to restore healthy, functional movement in the body. And it's especially relevant for those who are injured or have dysfunctional mechanics going on, which is really all of us. So anyways, the clients who may have had past experience with Pilates or some other fitness modality, they'll come in and they're just ready to beat it up. They're ready to sweat. They want to be killed. They want to be killed. This is a very common concept in fitness. I need to be killed to know something's going on. I'm becoming healthier. And she kind of looks at them and says, okay. Kind of lets them do that. And she says, okay, either you're going to be able to stay with her and trust her, or this client isn't going to last. It just won't work. They'll be disappointed with her, because she feels very deeply that it's actually about nonviolence and letting go that is the cornerstone of moving towards stronger, healthier movement in the body. So always have to check, does the path match the goal? The other day we had boot camp and everyone's killing themselves and techniques all over the place. And then there's like 3 minutes of stretching at the end. And all you can say is, good, if you want to be healthy, your restorative aspects should be through your workout, but should be at least equal in time to your pounding it aspects, if you want to be balanced, right? So you just worked out for 40 minutes and you're stretching for 5. Got to check that path. So the path should ideally match the goal. And if it isn't, one of two things are happening. It's not the appropriate path for your goal, or I am not following the directions properly. And but either one can happen. I know often Raj Yoga, which is a very non-violent path, there's discipline, etc., but there's no violence. And then souls start to feel uncomfortable. They want a holiday. And and they blame it on the directions, when in fact, it might be, I'm not following the directions properly. I'm following it in the old way, which was quite gruesome. So religion, spirituality has a long-standing history of no pain, no gain. If I make a mistake, I've got to beat myself up. That's the only way I'm going to get anywhere. Whereas Raj Yoga, it's like, if I make a mistake, I need to understand what happened. Otherwise, I will not get anywhere. I need to understand what happened, not beat myself. I never let go of my self-respect. So it's a path. This is the largest spiritual organization in the world led by women. And it's not a feminist organization, it's a non-violent organization. In other words, it puts maternal qualities in front. Understanding is the leader at this time in terms of transformation. The discipline of understanding is the best discipline of all. So whenever in anything, you know, whether it's nutrition or mental health or physical health or spirituality, to have a component, that non-violent piece of understanding integrate into the path is essential for there to be change. So you'll see in Raj Yoga, such as this moment now where we're blah, 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 knowledge plays a huge role. We call it a university because there cannot be violence in reaching a non-violent destination. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So always checking, does the path match the goal? And even, you know, I know in fitness, I remember one day we had a lovely instructor and she'd ask in the middle class, so right now, you know, it's a high impact, jumping around kind of thing. Right now, look inside. What's your goal? What's your goal right now? What's your aim right now? Your focus right now? I remember the first thought that came to me was grace, not beat it, kill it, push it, work it, pump it. It was grace. Even though it's burpees and all this, grace. And having that discipline of that virtue transforms the quality of the activity, can make even the most seemingly intense exercise serene and peaceful. And I have a favorite calisthenic athlete who is so committed to nonviolence that I can watch him do the most. I can put him side by side with another athlete and they're doing the same exercise. You know, it might be a handstand or a push-up or a deadlift, and it's as if you're watching night and day. Because his path is so nonviolent. And so it's just this discipline of nonviolence. He deeply understands movement. He has a deep inner, we say dharana or character of nonviolence. So always have to check, does the path match the goal? That was a very long-winded response to a really, really good point. So it deserves much more time. But we have 2 minutes, 1 minute really, to look at the last concept of stickability, which is what we started with. So we don't have to spend much time on it. So being able to sustain, it was such a good point, Leah. Thank you for bringing it up. Being able to sustain when I'm doing that stickability, to stick with it. And that means it has to be so delicious to the soul. So we won't stick with something, quite frankly, that is painful and gruesome. We try to. And eventually, you know, I heard this story the other day and it touched my heart about a very young, very popular, he's with a very popular group. And he was very hard on himself, really hard. Out of all of them, they shared he was the hardest on himself. And there came a, you know, it leads you into a very dark place. And there came a point for his own sanity where he said, I have to look at what I'm doing. And so began this love thyself approach. He's still very disciplined. He's still so progressive, but very different. Work hard to get results. So yeah. So this is kind of a paradigm that we've all kind of implicitly agreed to or participate in. And so this to me is the nuts and bolts of meditation, of Raj Yoga, is having these beautiful conversations inside, starting to really stop, listen to some new information, stop and compare it to what the old stuff. What have I been doing? And is it working anymore? Is this actually going to lead to where I want to get to? So these are really, even though it seems, and this goes back to why the organization was so fascinating at the beginning because they had to fly in the face of really deeply held customs and systems, really, really deeply held. So a classic example we give, we have a picture here that in that society, it's nobody's fault. It's just, we all agreed to we all just moved around and accepted it, but that young women were simply destined to get married for dowry. That was it. Right? So the lowest class, if you will, the most disenfranchised were young women, Kumaris, and mothers. And then you have these young women who, according to their part, just the luck of their fate, were somehow exposed to a different way of thinking, where they were inspired, invited, told, you can become a spiritual leader. This was so different from what society was saying and what they had to go through to really honor that invitation. I don't know if any of us could do. But they never had violence, even though they had to confront, and this is the last one of stickability, they had to confront a lot of violence. And now at this time, almost all the violence that we will meet is from inside. Ego is very violent. So it's not even outside anymore. Most of the violence that the reaction is from inside. Ego, attachment, fear, they're all really harsh. And to be able to respond to them with love, with self-respect, with understanding, these are the only powers that will melt them, transform them into allies. It's the only powers. Never try to have hand-to-hand combat with ego. You will not win. But they had to confront this externally, and there's so many wonderful stories about this, but it is mind-boggling. This idea of, okay, when we say society, it turns out we've internalized a lot of it. And a lot of these kind of violent and harsh standards are kind of internalized. So now we're sustaining them inside and we're feeding them back into the outside and on and on. So the buck has to kind of stop here. And I have to kind of emerge this very peaceful, self-respectful sense of self and have this dialogue, this nonviolent dialogue within, having a conversation with ego is fascinating. And love is really the only thing that melts it. So much understanding. So that's the final form. One is the newness sticks in there. I'm able to sustain it. I have a path that makes sustainability possible. I can stick with it. And the last one is what happens when obstacles come. So back to that gymnast sprinting down that runway, going at the vault and flipping and sticking it at the end. They have massive resistance, momentum that wants to just knock them down. And how will they stick it? Today, the client would be doing something and the wind would come. It's like, how are they going to stick it? And the answer, whether it's the vaulter or my poor client out there, is a strong core. And that's the same in spirituality. I have to have a strong core. We know what a strong core is physically. We say, you've got a backbone. The same as in spirituality, really to stick with it whether it's from outside, but most of it comes from inside. The opposition comes to knock me down. You make a mistake and ego just will not let go of it. Ego has a massive case file on us, by the way. It's got years and years of accumulated evidence that you cannot survive without it, that you are nothing without it. It has a very big case file so that it can argue its own existence very easily. The only thing I can use to stand up, to be able to stick and stay my ground, is self-respect. And this to me is always the top, I think, sort of thing you need to look for in any path you choose is their self-respect. If self-respect is not part of the package, I don't know if stickability is going to be possible. That is our core, and so we often say with this particular study that there are not followers. This is a study to create leaders, starting with self-leadership. This is a study that's based on dignity and self-respect. Because then I'm going to have that core, that strength to be able to face and respond beautifully to the opposition that comes, that will come, to be able to stick, to not get knocked down. So the first thing that we develop in the study, and it can take months and years, I know it's still an ongoing project for me, is that powerful core of self-respect. Self-respect is a spiritual commodity. It can never be a physical one. It can never be based, never, ever be based on anything outside, because everything outside changes. So if I base my sense of self-value on anything outside, including the physical body, it will be very unstable, because everything outside changes. It cannot be based on anything temporary that is physical. So it has to be in the realm of spirituality. The minute I start to explore my spiritual identity honestly, really feel it, that's when the seeds of self-respect are planted. So I can see we are over time. We're going to have to conclude here. Let's see what next week brings. I'm always forgetting to check the topic. I know what some of the topics are. I just can't recall what next week is. So anyways, it'll be a surprise if you come. Who knows? It's always the same information, so do not despair. But we'll end there. I'm going to give you, though, a second or two if there's anything you want to share to conclude. Are we okay? It's quiet out there. All right. Let's take a moment just for a very, very short reflection. It's such a wonderful, wonderful use of time. Feels so nurturing. When I go inside and really listen to my heart, to myself, it can take a while before that honest space is created. Having spent so much time building up an image, it doesn't always want to let go that easily. But when I become free and really listen, I can hear that cry inside for peace and happiness, and the even deeper cry where peace and happiness comes from is a cry to have that love and regard for the self, to live my life as a being who has love and regard for the self. Such a being is able to take responsibility for the self, never blames the outer world for losing their own integrity. Such a being has so much power and love and purity of heart. Truly beautiful inside. We often even say such a being is really a child of God, demonstrating the highest form of humanity. And yes, I am such a being. I am very open to the path that will lead me to that destination. As long as I stick with that vision for myself, that path will emerge. Om Shanti. Thank you again for joining. Until we meet next time. Emma.
Om Shanti, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Hema.
Om Shanti, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Leah, for coming. And thank you, Nilu.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.